It's been more than a decade since Sherlock Holmes, A Game of Shadows ended, but this long wait is perfect for Sherlock Holmes 3. The second movie in Robert Downey Jr.'s Sherlock Holmes franchise left a clear door open for a threequel, and it was assumed that one would come shortly after its 2011 release. However, all these years later, there is still only tentative news about Sherlock Holmes 3. This is a bit of a disappointment, but when considering where Holmes' story was left off in A Game of Shadows, it actually works out. The ending of Sherlock Holmes, A Game of Shadows saw Downey Jr.'s Sherlock Holmes jump off the Reichenbach Falls with arch-nemesis Professor Moriarty. Both were presumed dead, leaving Jude Law's Dr. Watson to mourn his complicated friend. However, in the movie's final moments, Watson receives a package containing an underwater breathing device. When he rushed from his office to inquire about who had delivered it, Sherlock Holmes appeared. Of course, A Game of Shadows never saw Watson discover that his friend was alive himself, but the wait just might be worth it. Sherlock Holmes 3 taking this long will make Holmes' return from the dead better. The longer the wait, the stronger the tension. Robert Downey Jr. as Sherlock looking seriously and Jude Law's Watson smiling towards him against backdrop of crime board in Sherlock Holmes A Game of Shadows custom image by Grant Hermans. While Sherlock Holmes 3 isn't yet confirmed, recent updates suggest that a renewed script is in the works. By the time the movie is actually on the big screen, there would be about a 15-year gap between it and A Game of Shadows. While this wouldn't work with just any story, it's actually an advantage for Sherlock Holmes. The longer Sherlock takes to reveal to his loved ones that he is still alive, the more impactful this big moment will be. This is especially meaningful since the existing ending of the second Sherlock Holmes movie didn't make Sherlock's supposed death and return nearly as impactful as it could have been. Sherlock's death and return in A Game of Shadows had no impact whatsoever. Sherlock Holmes 2's ending could be retroactively improved. Sherlock Holmes A Game of Shadows Professor Moriarty. Not much time passed between Sherlock's fall, his funeral, and his sudden secret appearance in Watson's office in Sherlock Holmes, A Game of Shadows. The ending was meant, predominantly, to set up a threequel with a fun, cliffhanger twist. Of course, the fact that this threequel didn't immediately happen meant that this ending really just fell flat. It might have been more impactful as a definitive ending to the franchise if Downey Jr.'s Sherlock hadn't actually been seen on screen in the end. Instead, a shadowy figure could have added the question mark to the words "the end" on the typewriter. Had A Game of Shadow taken that route, the story's ending would have felt more mysterious. On the other hand, a threequel coming 5 or 6 years later might have felt anticlimactic. With a far more sizable weight, the dull impact of A Game of Shadows ending could be renewed with the idea that Watson had spent the past 15 years obsessively checking over his shoulder and giving everyone he meets a once-over to see if they are Sherlock in disguise. With a great script, Sherlock Holmes 3 could retroactively make A Game of Shadows ending stronger. Sherlock returning from the dead over a decade later can make for a great story. This long wait is actually more fitting with canon. Robert Downey Jr. as Sherlock Holmes. There is an additional, even more meaningful reason why Sherlock Holmes 3 taking so long would make for a better story. Sherlock's sacrifice at Reichenbach Falls was how Sir Arthur Conan Doyle had initially meant for his Sherlock Holmes series to end. The titular detective was really meant to be dead, but readers continued to pester the author for more stories for years. So, over a decade later, Doyle finally gave everyone what they wanted and published a new Sherlock Holmes novel, which revealed that his iconic character had only faked his death. The ending of A Game of Shadows proves that matching Doyle's decade-long gap was never the intention of the Sherlock Holmes movie franchise. Still, since these films are already in this boat, it might as well lean all in. It's neat that the story will continue after so long since this is closer to canon than a quicker threequel might have been. There is a lot of opportunity here for a meaningful homage to Doyle's work, with some references to the time gap that could draw to mind the events of the books. Of course, for this to happen, Sherlock Holmes 3 must become an actual reality. Only time will tell.